George Takei, welcome back to Bullseye. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for taking the time to come in.
Good to be here and be talking to you.
Why did you want to write your story in this form, in graphic form?
Well, I have been actually in prison most of my adult life. My childhood was behind very real barbed wire fences, courtesy of the United States government. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, but looked like this. And then when we were released, and I was 9 or 10 years old, living in East LA, all Mexican-American neighborhood, I realized I was different in another way. But this difference was not visible. It was inside me. I thought the other guys were very attractive, but the other boys didn't feel that way. I was different again.
Let's talk briefly about your internment as a child. You were, 5 years old?
5.
So do you remember it? I mean, not being in the camp, but do you remember finding out that it was going to happen? Do you remember leaving home?
I remember the leaving home part. I remember the excitement and the anxiety that my parents exhibited. But that particular morning, when my father walked into the bedroom I shared with my brother, Henry, he dressed us quickly and said, wait in the living room or play in the living room. I'm helping your mother pack. And our baby sister was in a crib in their bedroom. And so we went to the living room. There's nothing to do. And so Henry and I was standing by the front window, just gazing out at the neighborhood, just, whatever was happening. And suddenly we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried rifles with shiny bayonets on them. I mean, that was pretty scary. They stomped up the front porch and with their fists began banging on the door. Henry and I were terrified. My father came rushing out, and opened the door, and the soldiers said, "Get your family out of here." And one of the 2 soldiers pointed his bayonet at my father right in front of us. Henry and I were standing there, just frozen, petrified. And my father said, I got to have 5 minutes. I got to help my wife packing. And the other guy said, okay, go ahead. And my father went back, and the guy with the pointed bayonet followed my father into their bedroom. Henry and I just stood there petrified. My father came out carrying 2 heavy suitcases. He had small boxes tied in twine under his arms, gave me one of them, Henry the other, to carry, and he hefted the suitcases and said, "Follow me." And we followed him out onto the driveway, and we waited for our mother. Shortly after that, my mother came out. She had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were pouring down her cheeks. I remember that the memory of that morning is seared into that. I don't remember the Pearl Harbor excitement. I mean, I knew things were happening, but we didn't understand it. But that morning is one that I will never, ever be able to forget.
You initially went to Santa Anita Raceway,
Right.
Which was where it was sort of the way station for people to be assigned to the camps.
We call it the assembly point.
Yeah, as the camps were being hastily constructed and converted from other types of buildings and so on and so forth. People, including you, lived in what had been the horse stables at the raceway.
We did. And I remember the stench, the fly buzzing all the time, insects skittering around. It was a filthy place. The smell was overwhelming.
What was it like when you got to the camp in Northern California?
Oh, that was we were first taken 2/3 of the way across the country. This is when the camps had finished their construction to the
To Arkansas, right?
swamps of Arkansas, exotic land, totally different from Southern California. Right beyond the barbed wire fence, water, muck, and trees, tall, majestic trees were growing out of it, and their roots came out, twisted and turned, went back in and out, and in and out like a snake. I mean, it was fascinating. Those trees it was a forest of those trees. And the muck, the water came out, came onto the camp underneath the barbed wire fence, and there were little tiny black wiggly fish swimming around, and they didn't move too fast. And with my hands, I was able to I cup my hands and be able to catch them and put them in the jar and watch them every morning, and saw them one morning develop bumps on their sides, and a few mornings later, legs popped out and their tails fell up, and they escaped from my jar. Miraculous. Arkansas was full of these miracles, like magic. Fish that turn into frogs and escape from your jar. So Arkansas was experience of discovery and learning. They told me we heard strange sounds coming from the swamps, squawks and hoots and yeah, oh, and the big boys told us, "You know what they are?" And I said, "No." They said, "They're dinosaurs." I hadn't heard of that. I said, what's that? And they said, well, this particular big boy, he was like, 11 or 12. He said, they're great, big, weird monsters that lived millions of years ago, and then they died. I said, they died? How come we hear them out there? And the boy looked a little nonplussed, and then he quickly said, they died all over the world except in Arkansas. They live out in the forest there. And I believed them. And I saw my first hog in Arkansas, and I thought they were baby dinosaurs. So, my time in Arkansas, we were there about less than 2 years. A wonderful adventure of discovery. But something else was happening to the adults. The government discovered that there's a wartime manpower shortage. And here are all these young men and women that they categorized as enemy alien. I mean, we were neither. We weren't the enemy, and we weren't aliens. We were Americans, and we were loyal Americans. Something that's very familiar to us today.
One of the things that's really beautiful and difficult in your book is the depictions of intimacy in your life before you met your partner, Brad, in the mid-1980s. And when I say intimacy, I don't just mean sexual intimacy, but any kind of intimacy. Did you, before the 80s, ever have a community of people with whom you could be openly gay or a community of people who were themselves gay or queer with whom you could find fellowship?
I avoided that because I'm an actor and I was enjoying some success. Star Trek was enormously popular and I couldn't afford to come out. It would be too punishing. And so, I was closeted. And my sense of guilt was building as well. I mean, it's both the guilt in not participating when you're an activist in the peace movement in Vietnam or nuclear testing that was going on at the same time, a civil rights movement. You feel like a hypocrite. Here I am on all these critical issues of the time and silent, standing by the sidelines on the most personal issue, not speaking out. It was a horrible feeling. The pressure of, people who were closeted had pressure, true. But for me as an actor within that invisible barbed wire fence was excruciating. And I just gritted my teeth and said, this is my life.
There's a really heartbreaking moment in the book where you go to a bathhouse and, you're just there to meet somebody, because you're a human being. And you meet this guy and he's cute.
I see him in the shower.
Yeah.
He wasn't just cute. This was in Indianapolis. I was stunned. And I turned a corner and there he was. And our eyes connected. And I said, hi. A kind of, casual greeting. And he initially said the usual hi. And then I saw his eyes glimmer up. Surprise, recognition. And then he said, oh, hi. And I knew I was recognized. And I felt like I had ice cold water poured on me, all over my naked body. I said, have a good time. And I went back to my room, got dried off and dressed, and I left. I was recognized. That is the terror that was haunting me all the time. And I knew it wouldn't end. So he could talk about it to somebody, and somebody might have some connection to a media, sort of like Tab Hunter. I mean, when it was in the scandal sheet, that's when his disappearance began. And I was haunted by the prospect of some article exposing me as gay for years after that fact. Thank God he never talked.
I mean, it's this extraordinary extra burden that not only did you have to keep your identity secret from the outside world, but that even within the gay community, because of your notability, you had to separate yourself, or at least felt you had to separate yourself because, it would only take one person
who knew somebody with the media, radio, newspaper, television.
And so there were many people who were living double lives at the time who could have some measure of romantic and interpersonal intimacy within a gay community, even if it was separate from the rest of their lives. But because of your famous face, even that wasn't accessible to you.
No, because I kept remembering Tab Hunter disappeared after that newspaper article. And it was one of those scandal sheets in the newspaper boxes, plastic boxes that you get for free. Essentially, a scandalous expose headline, but it's mostly ads for local local businesses.
You met your husband in a gay running club. Was that club the first time that you had, I don't know exactly how to put this, signed up for something gay? You know what I mean?
I think I certainly know what you mean. Yeah, I think that was it. I was a runner all my life, from my high school days on. Running is a solitary activity. You're running alone up in the Hollywood Hills, or it's very solitary. And I'm a gregarious guy. And again, in one of those community papers that I picked up off the rack,
Newsstand, yeah.
I saw a story on this gay running club. I thought, gay running club? Running. I love running, but how could they run? It's public. You're exposed. But I knew I wasn't the only gay that was closeted. These guys are closeted, and yet they're running in public. They can be seen. But I stopped thinking, how are they to know? I mean, they're runners. That's the visible thing. And I thought, well, maybe I can get away with it. And I showed up for the first one. And the president of the club, before one more gathering, people are stretching and warming up. And this good-looking guy came up to me and said, I'm the president of the LA Front Runners, and we have a tradition of introducing new guys joining us. What's your name? And I said, oh, no, I'm just here to run with you guys anonymously. And he said, no, we're all closeted. I'm a lawyer. Some are, they all have professions. So don't worry. And so I said, okay, just call me George. And he introduced me. And I kind of liked him, and he called and said, would you like to have dinner? And I said, yes. And so he became my first front runner that I had a relationship with. Then another new runner showed up. This was a few months later. And he introduced him as Brad. And I thought, I'd like to get to know him better. But he was a really good runner. Well, we ran around Silver Lake. And immediately, this new guy, Brad, went to the front of the line. He was really a front runner. And I'm a middle runner. That's where I usually run. But I said, I'm going to try to have a conversation with them. And so I started running faster and tried to catch up to him. And by the time I was only an arm's length away from him, I just couldn't do it and talk at the same time. I fell back. But I talked with him afterwards and got to chatting with him. I discovered he's a nice guy. And a few things led one after the other, and we started dating, and the rest is history.
We're recording this during Pride. It's June as we talk. And as I was reading this story, it struck me as such a testament to the meaning and purpose of Pride, that here you are gathered with these guys doing the most quotidian thing in the world, which is like being in a running club, right? It's just a really regular thing. And it is the fact that you can engage with these guys in such a regular quotidian way together, joined by this piece of your identities, that essentially gave you the courage to fall in love.
And also, they were closeted as well. They had careers. Brad was a journalist. There were others who worked for the city or the county. They all had lives, and they were gay, but they wanted to protect that fact. And so they were running with other gays while closeted, and they were like anybody else, quotidian. I love that word.
One of the things that stands out about this period in your life is that as you are, albeit secretly, joining the gay community for the first time in a meaningful way and falling in love, it's the mid-1980s, which was one of the most difficult times to be a gay man in America because of the AIDS crisis.
It was the beginning of the AIDS crisis. People were chatting about it, but no one. There wasn't much information. The newspapers, TV news didn't have much information other than what was common knowledge. It was really victimizing us and the ignoring of this issue that was so literally life and death was another form of expressing society's attitude toward gays.
Can I tell you what really got to me? Is there's a sequence in the book that so specifically visual, where you visit a friend in the hospital. The sequence is about you trying to get the caretakers there to give him blankets. But I have to say that when I saw the sores depicted on his body, it was such a vivid reminder of that time for me. I remembered when I was a child, the sores on family friends' faces and bodies when they were very sick. It was very powerfully transporting for me. How did it feel for you to revisit such a painful time?
Writing this book, there were many, many moments where I teared up. When I wrote that part, the AIDS part, I literally sobbed because it was so visceral and so close still to me. Those guys that passed in such an ugly, cruel, grotesque way were nice guys. They were great athletes. And the punishment was so nonsensical, so cruel. And it wasn't just the disease itself, but society's attitude to these guys who were suffering. I mean, it was a painful, painful thing. And society's attitude and the government's attitude just compounded that. Human beings can be very savage-like. I mean, to know that people are suffering and still pile on as they did. Reagan, who was a conservative, and conservatives have their values and all, but they are so cruelly valueless, inhuman. And I see Reagan as human because when we were campaigning for an apology and redress for our unjust imprisonment, he initially was opposed to it, but he signed the bill and had the guts to apologize publicly that this government is a human government. Although our ideals are great, we are fallible human beings who make mistakes. And Roosevelt, who was a great president, made an incredible, lasting mistake, categorizing us as enemy aliens with no evidence. And things go in cycles. Here we are again. That enemy alien phrase just being applied to innocent people now, again, today. And then, like just this weekend, sending in the National Guard to round up innocent people who are so vulnerable and subjecting them to such incredible punishment. And I, as a Japanese American, know that cruelty. I was a child, and it was my parents that was subjected to the incredible anguish. Our democracy is a great system, but the capacity for human frail to be expressed in such a grotesque way. And the AIDS crisis was one of them.
Where we're sitting right now is in Westlake in Los Angeles. It's not far from two of the neighborhoods that you grew up in. You grew up partly in Skid Row and partly in East LA. It's also very close to one of the sites of ICE's first round of major workplace raids, a Home Depot that's on Wilshire Boulevard, probably not even a mile from here, in our neighborhood. You're someone who has experienced firsthand having been abducted by the government without charge. What is it like for you right now as an 88-year-old to see that playing out in your hometown, in places that you've known your whole life?
I love my hometown, but at the same time, I'm aware of the human fallibility of this hometown. I love this city, but I'm constantly reminded that it's a human town with the human fallibilities.
Do you think that having seen the suspension and erasure of legal and human rights in the internment of Japanese Americans and the mass deportations of the 1950s in Southern California makes you more optimistic or pessimistic about what's happening in the United States right now?
Americans don't know our history. It's so important. We have a great system called democracy. We the people. We the people. And that was chanted just a few days ago when the No King movement happened. We're ultimately the boss. But if we don't know our system, and when I was a teenager and I had after-dinner conversations with my father, he used to quote to me the Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Our democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. He said those are noble ideals. That's what makes our democracy great. But the weakness of American democracy is also in those words, of the people, by the people, for the people, because the people have a responsibility. They have a job. They have a citizen's responsibility if it's our government, and they mess up on that. We have elections. We have decisions to make, but we have to cast informed votes, and we don't bother to find out. We just listen to slogans and television ads. We're not really responsible citizens of a democracy. And so he said, we have to actively participate. And he said, I want all my children to be active at school, volunteer for charitable causes, volunteer when there's somebody that needs to have funds raised, join clubs, and participate in student government. And so he encouraged us to really know American democracy. And the trouble is, we don't have Americans who know that. And that's why I wrote, They Called Us Enemy. And I talk about my conversations with my father as a teenager. We have a responsibility. And if we don't exercise that, then there is the penalty to be paid for it. And it was so heartening to see Trump lorded over that military demonstration in Washington, D.C., and you saw 2,000 demonstration of We the People, No King, all over America. This is democracy. And people need to know that we have a responsibility as Americans. Trouble is, most people don't.
Well, George, I'm very grateful for your time. It's really nice to get to see you again. Thank you for coming and talking to me.
And I really appreciate your, first of all, having read my book and the message that my book has. You truly understand it. We are Americans who have a grave responsibility. So thank you for allowing me to talk to you about it.